Here's just a quick video showing some of the things I've learned about GM power vent windows. This is from a 1964 Buick Riviera that I'm fixing. All the rubber was corroded or falling apart, so I replaced all the seals, all the weather stripping. This was originally a manual crank vent window. I'm missing a couple pieces off of it, it fell apart, and I wanted power vent windows. Power vent windows for the Riviera are extremely rare and therefore really expensive. I found another option though with Chevy power vent windows motors. This is one meant for a 1958 to 1964 Chevy. Fits the Impalas and all the big cars. It is quite different from the original motor. The original motor was rectangular and a little bit larger. You can see this guy has a round case. However, the bolt pattern is exactly the same as the Buick, and I think it's the same across all of GM's line, other than pre-1958. I don't know about the later ones though, but the bolt pattern is exactly the same. It fits exactly on here. I had to open up the bolt mounts a little bit. I slotted them with a drill bit because there was alignment issues with the gaskets. But anyhow, the motor fits on here just fine. The connector, I'm not sure what that's from. I'm assuming the same generation Chevrolets. I'm just going to use flat connectors on it and seal it up. The motor came from Tom's Classic on eBay. I bought both the left and the right for $250. They are brand new, and they have metal gears inside of them instead of the plastic gears that GM originally put in them. So they've been upgraded. When I was trying to figure out how to get power vent window motors into here, I attempted using a small industrial motor, which is this guy here. I made the bracket for it, and I made the adapter as a coupler meant for, I believe, an RC car. I slotted it so it would fit the bar here. It worked fine, but it was too much stress for the motor and stripped the gears. If you want to attempt something like that, this motor is about 8 RPM and it worked perfect. It was the same speed as this one turned out to be. But this is a DC motor. It does not have the switching positive polarities that the factory motors do. So it takes a different kind of switch is the only real issue. So it was a good idea, but did not work out. It was not strong enough. Some of the issues I've ran across with the weather stripping on the windows is it did not fit that great. It was pretty close, but I had some binding issues with the vent window. There was a series of small little tabs running up here that were meant, I believe, to hold the window in place once it was closed to help it seal, but they were causing it to bind. Once the window was put back in there, it was binding so hard that it was not possible to close the window fully. Those had to be shaved off. I used a grinding stone on a Dremel and a very careful hand and was able to resolve that. And now the window shuts completely. Some of the things to watch out for when you're putting in the rubber into the vent windows is I would start, you have one screw up here and then you have two large screws right here. Taking it apart doesn't matter which way you do it, but putting it back together, I found out that once the weather stripping's in, put in a small screw, but do not tighten it fully, just most of the way. And then go and put in one of these screws or both of them, but do not tighten them fully. Once those are back in, go back up here, tighten this guy up fully, and then tighten these guys up fully. It goes back together much, much easier. Also, one other thing I figured out is that this bar right here is actually pretty soft metal. Mine was twisted and it was preventing the window from closing fully, because the motor was hitting its internal stops. So I found out that by putting a crescent wrench here and another one right here and then twisting them against each other, I was able to straighten that back out. So I believe that's a factory method of adjusting the window in relation to the motor, because the motor has internal stops. So if you have any issues with the motor stopping before the window closes fully, I would take a look at this and possibly tweak it. You can churn it without breaking it. It's very thick looking metal, but it's actually fairly soft. You can bend it with hand tools. Okay, here's the motor reattached to the vent window frame. Show one thing right here. I've found out that there is a little bolt right here that goes through to attach the shaft. I found it's best to leave that out. This guy appears to change. It needs to move over back and forth a little bit as it opens, and it's best to leave this loose so it has the slack to do so. I don't see a issue with leaving that bolt out. The vent window is held in place firmly. It's not going to go anywhere. The motor's held in place firmly. It's not going to go anywhere. Having slack between these two pieces seems to work out just fine. Okay, here's the window motor in motion. This is just a simple GM power window switch. Uses the normal GM wiring, 2 positives, the power coming into it, and then a chassis ground. I am running this off of a small desktop power supply that I've picked up a while back. It's pretty handy to have if you're testing motors. Okay, so motor's attached, and here's how fast it moves. You can see the motor has quite a bit of power. The only issue I have with it is that it tends to rotate by itself just a little bit. It's not really slack. I think it's just how fast the motor moves. But through careful adjustment, through slotting these holes, and then some very careful trimming of the weather stripping, I'm able to get the window to shut completely and seal up fully against the sill. So it kind of resolved those issues. There's still a little bit of holes right here and stuff like that where it doesn't sit perfect, but that's good enough.